Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, in the furore surrounding comments made by British Nobel laureate and scientist Sir Tim Hunt, we take a look at the women in science who've made breakthroughs despite the odds. We also talk to science journalist Connie Saint Louis, who blew the whistle on Tim Hunt's remarks, and the push to have more female engineers here in France. But first, it may be 2015, but across the world in general, women still make up less than 30% of scientists. Yet despite some progress, they're still being paid less, promoted not as frequently, and win fewer grants. Shirley Sitbon reports on the extraordinary women who, despite the odds, have been responsible for major scientific advances.
Here's Marie Curie, or rather the actress playing her role in a new movie about the Nobel Prize laureate. When thinking about female scientists, Marie Curie's name comes to mind first. But the woman honored twice for her work on radioactivity is not alone. 15 women won science Nobel Prizes since she did, including Maybrit Moser in 2014, and Gertrude Elion for discovering the AZT drug, which helps people suffering from AIDS. One of those who discovered the double helix structure of DNA was also a woman. Some female scientists got no credit for their work, like Marie-Anne Lavoisier, wife of the prominent chemist. In paintings, she's seen measuring, writing, and discussing experiments with her husband, but no chemistry book mentions her. Although women have done so much for science, there are still, even today, half as many female researchers than male.
Men and women perceive power differently. A man wants a position of power to have power. Women want power to accomplish things.
In some countries, girls feel they're not made for science, while in others, they have closed the gap with boys. Girls who do manage to study science and earn their PhD are still likely to drop out. The main reason? Children. They believe they can't have them and pursue their careers. Meanwhile, fathers have no problem staying at the lab.
The biological clock keeps ticking. Many women who go for high-ranking positions sacrifice their personal lives. I personally think you shouldn't do that. I have 3 children. I had one after my thesis, another after my doctorate, and the third when I got this job.
Women who go through the obstacles still face bias and discrimination. Tests show that with identical CVs and projects, men get bigger grants. Europe, various countries and research institutes have established quotas to help women. But that's just a first step.
Now, a few weeks ago, British Nobel laureate Sir Tim Hunt caused a Twitter storm, but not about any major scientific breakthrough. Instead, it was over comments he made about the supposed weaknesses of women in the field, suggesting even scientists should work in gender-segregated labs. He went on to say the trouble with, quote, girls, unquote, is that they cause men to fall in love with them and cry when criticised. Since then, he said he made the comments in jest and that it was all just a big misunderstanding. But that was not enough to stop the furore, not to mention the humour with the hashtag distractingly sexy making waves online. Now, the woman who blew the whistle on Hunt's comments was Connie Saint Louis, a science journalist and professor who was attending the conference in South Korea where he was speaking, and she joins me today from London. Connie, thanks for being with us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Now, when you heard what Sir Tim Hunt had to say, what was your initial reaction?
My first thought was, goodness me, what is that English person doing saying these really outrageous things? I'm so embarrassed all the way in Korea, and here I am listening to these ridiculous comments being made by a British man. And then I suddenly realised he was Tim Hunt, and I was just really aghast.
So, Connie, do you think that the amount of backlash against Sir Tim Hunt has been because of what his supporters have described as a Twitter lynch mob, or is it really a genuine reflection of gender inequality in the science community?
I think women are at a moment in time where they've really had enough with this kind of behaviour and this kind of poor portrayal of themselves. And I just think one of the things about social media is that they can seize it and use it for their own good. I don't think there has been a lynching mob. I think, of course, a lot of people have said it's inappropriate. I think the distractingly sexy hashtag has been really clever and funny and shows the breadth of the way women like to campaign. So the word lynch mob, I don't recognise it, to be honest. I think just people expressing the same sort of frustration as I and the other 100 people that were in the room. Why is it appropriate in 2015 for somebody to think this is an OK way to behave?
So Tim Hunt has had to step down from several positions. Was that enough, in your opinion?
I'm not bothered what happens to Tim Hunt. I think what is important to me is that we keep thinking about what can be done about women in science. This is only a reflection of what goes on in society. I think one of the things that was also really important is that when I put that tweet out, I was very aware of the phenomena of Twitter shaming, and I thought, well, actually, I don't want this to happen to him because I think it's really horrifying when it happens. I want this to be useful and be taking women in science a little step further to getting the kind of equality that they need. And so I immediately started to ask his organisation that he's a fellow of, the Royal Society, which is the National Academy of Science in the UK. So what are you going to do about a fellow that says these kind of things abroad? And when I got a very poor response from them, I asked them again. I decided to set up a petition because the Royal Society is the oldest National Academy of Science. It's been going since 1660, and it has never had a female president in that time. Not to have appointed a woman to head that organisation, I think, is really, really a serious omission because there are women out there that could do this.
Connie, the reality is, however, in general, across the world, women still are the minority in the field of science. Why are we still lagging so far behind?
I think because of attitudes that exist in the lab. My neighbour's daughter is a Cambridge PhD student, and she was recently talked about a visit from a really senior scientist from the States to their labs in Cambridge, and the male PhD students were introduced, and she and her colleagues, the female colleagues, weren't introduced. Now, that's just incredible that they can be sort of pushed to the back. Now, fortunately, the scientist who was visiting walked up to the young ladies and said, hello, what's your name? What are you doing? And so I think they dealt with that very well. But I find it incredible that that sort of action is still going on.
So how do you correct that?
Well, I think actually what it now needs is a sort of a positive I wouldn't say a positive discrimination. I think just positively thinking and about enhancing women in these places. So for one thing, one could do is let's have, like I think most Labour Party and Conservative Party and Liberal parties do, let's have some all-women shortlists, all-women candidates to be put forward for some of these really big jobs, like heading the MRC, like heading the Wellcome Trust, like heading the Royal Society. Let's not say we can carry on like this in a really slow way and it will change, which is what I think the head of the Royal Society, Sir Paul Nurse, says. Let's say, let's do something a bit more dramatic now because the time has come. And I think the role model that helps younger science females to aspire, they're not there still. And so really some urgent action needs to be taken.
Connie Saint Louis, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now, here in France, about 50% of female high school students graduate with a science major, yet only 1 out of 5 engineers is indeed a woman. The push is now on to convince more women to enter the field.
La conductance. The start of a lesson in electronics at an engineering school near Paris. Only 15% of the students are girls. The course, which focuses on aeronautics, does not attract many young women, and yet they often have better results than boys.
My father always talked to me about things that are considered boy subjects, so I've always been immersed in this, while my girlfriend's parents or fathers didn't necessarily talk to them about cars and airplanes and football and so on, so they would never even imagine working in one of these fields.
While there is some way before parity between the sexes can be achieved, the engineering sector is doing all it can to court young women.
Today, companies are looking for women engineers. We're in the age of gender equality, and that doesn't just mean numbers and sectarianism. On the contrary, it means young women and young men complementing each other in aeronautics and in every other field.
Only 1/5 of French engineers are women, and the higher you climb up the corporate ladder, the less women you see. Karine Boissy-Rousseau is an exception. She works for a multinational company that produces industrial gas and manages 450 employees, most of whom are men.
I've noticed that sometimes the clients I deal with don't immediately realize who they're talking to. So I've had to learn to explain. I'm the manager.
As well as sexism, wage imbalance is also alive and well. Today, on average, a male engineer in France earns 30% more than his female counterpart. But there is hope for those who aspire to be engineers and business leaders. Within 2 years, the boards of large companies listed on the stock exchange will have to be 40% female.
And that's it for now. And if you'd like to comment on what you've just seen, you can head to our Facebook page. That's France24, full stop the 51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. Thanks for your feedback so far, and please keep those comments coming in. Until our next program, bye for now.